Can we tell? If it weren't for social distancing, you might believe it. So thank you so much for including me. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks, Maria. That was so informative. I appreciate your presentation so much. I learned a lot. So yes, basically your introduction talked about my company, Hemp and Humanity. We are basically a quadruple bottom line company, which means we focus on planet, people, performance, as well as purpose. And yes, I started this company a number of years ago based on the success that I had with the hemp plant, specifically CBD, to address several autoimmune conditions that I have and to enable me to get back in, onto that snowboard and into competitions. I'm an active senior, and I wasn't feeling well. And through my journey learning about the hemp plant and CBD a number of years ago, I realized that the information I was learning and the access that I had to this plant was too good not to share with others. So I created Hemp and Humanity, and as you mentioned, we are out in the community. We provide education around the plant. We do curation. We curate a very consciously developed collection of products out there to make sure that we're only representing top quality products. There are a lot of snake oils out there, and we believe that an informed consumer is an empowered consumer. And we do everything we can to provide enough information so that folks can take ownership of their own journey with the plant and learn what they need to in order to have a relationship with it. So as you mentioned as well, we've spoken through your organization, Code 420 Events. We've spoken about the hemp plant itself, and it's such a remarkable plant. We humans and this plant have been together for thousands of years. It's entrenched in our agriculture, in our history, and except for Prohibition, which began in the 1930s, we had this great relationship and love affair with this plant. It is now revitalizing family farming. It is bridging the urban-rural divide. It is accomplishing so many things thanks to a reemergence of the plant and some changes in legislation that have recognized that the hemp plant is not intoxicating, does not belong on a controlled substance list, and can provide so many benefits for our society. So everyone's familiar with CBD at this point, or most people have at least heard it. I mean, I can't think of too many other things that are both in your gas station and at your doctor's office. It's really ubiquitous. And I'm thankful to CBD, not only personally, but because it's that shiny object that's brought attention to the hemp plant itself. But we are just beginning to scratch the surface of all of the benefits that this plant has for us. The good news is that in 2019, in the US, we planted about 250,000 acres of hemp. So we are really revving up. It's a state-by-state plan. In New York State, Cuomo has been very supportive of hemp, and in the last several years, the industries have really grown in this, the hemp industries have really grown in this state, but also across the country. It's a sustainable plant with superpowers. CBD does help us with so many things. It works with our endocannabinoid system. That is the regulatory system in our body made up of receptors and enzymes and endocannabinoids, which are basically just signaling molecules that help our body achieve homeostasis, which is basically that balance in our health. We heard of the term homeostasis in science with regard to our temperature. If we're too hot, we are going to sweat. If we're too cold, we'll shiver. We're always trying to get that that balanced temperature. And the same with homeostasis. It is basically the definition of good health. But I'm really here today to talk about the whole plant. And I thought I would start with just a little definition to clear some things up. So hemp belongs to the cannabis species, and so does marijuana. The difference between hemp and marijuana is a man-made, not a scientific definition, that is based on the percentage of THC in that plant or in that product. THC is the molecule responsible for that euphoric or high effect. And the number that was determined as to whether or not something is considered hemp or marijuana is 0.3% of THC. Anything that is equal to or less than 0.3% THC is considered hemp. Anything greater is considered marijuana. So I want to explore some of the incredible uses for this plant. Hemp is cultivated differently from marijuana. We use seeds, and it is cultivated more like an agricultural crop rather than using clones by hand, the way it is with marijuana. It has so many uses. It can feed us. It can clothe us. I'm wearing actually a vintage hemp blazer from Enviro Textiles. Barbara Philippone, who is one of the leading industry experts in hemp fiber. It can shelter us. There are houses made out of hemp. It can heal us, and it can fuel us. It is so remarkable in that way. And what is awesome about this plant is that there is a use for every single part of the plant, from the roots to the tips where the flowers are. So the roots have been used since ancient times for medicine. It could prevent cramps, inflammation, bleeding. It has some powerful medicinal properties. It also can be used for organic compost. Simply by leaving the hemp roots in the soil, you're doing the soil some good. The leaves and the flowers, this is where those cannabinoids, of which CBD is one, that's where they are found. It has all of those properties to help work with our endocannabinoid system, to fight inflammation, help us with memory, help us relieve pain, reduce anxiety, all of those wonderful things. But even the leaves that are left over after we've extracted these cannabinoids from it can also do some great things for us. Raw leaves are used also nutritionally, but even after that, the leaves themselves can be used for animal bedding or for other industries that require that type of material. So now the stalks are incredible. The long stalks have fibers and hemp hurd in them, and they can be used for the textiles such as fiber, like what I'm wearing, but also it can be used in paper, making ropes, and we'll talk about in a little bit also the cellulose molecules in that stalk can be used to create energy and fuel us. It's really remarkable. And the seeds themselves provide nutrition. They have essential fatty acids, omega-3s and 6s, which humans require for life. They can be used in balms for body care, which is the most prevalent use right now in the marketplace. But that same oil, hemp seed oil, can be used to replace harmful toxic materials such as varnishes and other industrial materials that you have to wear a mask to use, that are not necessarily human friendly. So every single part of the plant can be used, which means that this plant can have such an incredible environmental impact. Maria talked about the social and economical impact of this plant. I'm going to talk a little bit about the environmental impact of this plant. Our country has a recent history of focusing on manufacturing that relies on extraction and depletion of our natural resources. What hemp provides provides as an alternative to these is a sustainable regenerative source. We can grow it. It takes 12 to 16 weeks to grow. How great is that? Just as an example, 1 acre of hemp can yield 4 times the amount of fiber as 1 acre of trees and absorb 4 times the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. So you can probably tell, I am a known tree hugger. I love trees. They take years to grow. Chopping them down when we don't have to, depleting our rainforests that are basically the lifeblood, the lungs of our planet, enabling humans to live on our planet. We don't need to use those up when we've got hemp as a resource to be able to replace so many of the functions that trees or cotton have provided in the past. And then the bonus is that when you plant hemp, you're actually improving the air and the soil around you. Hemp has the ability to pull CO2 from the air and sequester it. It pulls toxins out of the ground. It remediates soils and makes them better. They even used planted hemp to relieve the area devastated by nuclear waste in Chernobyl. It's that powerful. Which, by the way, is a caveat. That's why you really want to make sure that when you're consuming CBD or anything, a hemp plant, that it is lab tested to make sure that it doesn't have those toxins in it. The deep roots of this plant can aerate the soil and replenish nitrogen and nutrients right back into the soil. Farmers know that hemp is a wonderful crop to have, and there are so many different uses just by growing it. Even if you're not harvesting it, it does some wonderful things for your soil. So the benefits of this plant also focus on just the fact that it can be used as alternatives to practices that harm our plant. You know, one example is our construction industry, which is necessary, but it has a huge carbon footprint. But we can use the hemp plant to help us with that. There's something called hempcrete that is basically a mixture of hemp and lime and water that can be used to build buildings and shelters. And what's great is, as an added bonus, is that this material is resistant to bugs and fire and mildew, and it retains, heat. So it's really an incredible thing. And another example is hemp wood. I brought a little, there we go, a little sample. This is hemp wood. It's basically a composite of hemp fibers with wood. And this is the hemp trash that's left behind after we've utilized all the other aspects of the plant. I think it's beautiful. And I think that you're going to see a lot more building with hemp wood, and all of the waste associated with extracting the vital medicines and other things and fibers from this plant will result in biomass that can also help with energy and fuel. In fact, the cellulose fibers or the cellulose molecules in the hurd, in the little woody core of the plant, can be used to replace graphene in superconductors. Hemp can be a efficient, excellent conduit of electricity, and it is right there at our fingertips. We can grow it and we can use it. I mentioned that we had prohibition of this plant beginning in the 1930s, and that included hemp, which at the time wasn't really distinguished between hemp and marijuana. And yet in the early 1940s, when we were fighting in World War II, the ban on hemp was lifted temporarily, and folks were encouraged to grow this plant for the war effort, to be used in parachutes and sails and other equipment. And I'm thinking about this more and more as we go through the challenges with COVID-19. here we are, and we are at a shortage for all of these materials that can help protect us. And yet hemp can